Welcome to the Future's Human podcast, where we explore the remarkable advancements shaping our world. Join me as we uncover the mysteries of science, technology, and innovation. Is technology finally delivering on its unfulfilled promise? We'll delve into the boundless power of the human imagination. Discover the impact on society, ethics, and the essence of being human. Let's shape the future together. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Future's Human podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, Mr. Charles Johnson, a colleague, a friend, and of course, a tech guru. Charles currently serves as the Director of Technology for Civicom, and I'm very excited to have him here with us today. Charles, thanks for being here. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Sure, thanks for having me. I got to say, I listened to the podcast yesterday, and the intro sounds a lot like the intros on a lot of the paranormal podcasts I listen to. So I don't know if that was by design or not.
I wanted it to be, I had this conversation with Dave, funny enough, a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, it's very theatrical. And I was like, you have to be a little bit theatrical in today's world, right? You have to captivate the audience. So that was my go at it. We may update it later. But do you like it or do you hate it?
I like it. It's cool. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I wanted to kind of be, because technology in some ways is a little mysterious, right? I was having this conversation with my mother the other day. I was showing her not to go off on a tangent, we'll bring the conversation back in just a second, but I was showing my mother my baby monitor for my daughter, who's 7 months old. I was showing her, it's an app on my phone. I was showing that I can play music, I could turn on a light, and she this is crazy. She my father would never believe it. My grandfather's in his late 80s now. And I was like, yeah, imagine all the other stuff that we can do. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying technology in some ways is mysterious, right? In some ways, we really don't know what's going to come next. And it's transforming and evolving what I feel like is at such a rapid rate. So it is a little, daunting, a little mysterious, a little edgy in some ways.
Yeah, that's what I always say. It's like, I don't know how normal people do it. Like when I say normal people, I mean people outside this industry, unless they have somebody around the house that knows how to do this stuff, because it's all just voodoo, right? Like,
Right?
I don't get it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and look, you know it better than myself, being a wizard of technology, being a coder and all these other aspects of what you do. You understand the mechanics a lot better than I ever will. But in some ways, I look at it, any piece of technology, even the project that we're currently working on, it really is fascinating how everything just kind of clicks together and what seems like magic just works, right? Or sorcery, right? It just all boom, poof, it happens. So that's what I wanted to dive into today. I wanted to talk a little bit about digital transformation because I feel we're at least in my lifetime, we're at what feels like hopefully not the climax, but I feel like we're at this point where it's transforming so quickly. You really have to be on the edge of your seat and be monitoring all of the different updates that are happening almost at a daily on a daily basis. So with that said, I want to identify some common challenges and roadblocks in digital transformation because I think that's something that a lot of businesses in particular are facing. And if they're not talking about it, I think they should, right? If you're not talking about transforming digitally in some capacity, you're already behind the curve. And I'm planning on titling this episode, Become Digital or Die, Achieving Digital Transformation. And I know that sounds a little, going back to the paranormal or mysterious, it sounds a little daunting, right? Or scary, but, it's kind of like that old political art with the snake that was broken apart. And I don't know if it was Benjamin Franklin or who put that
Join
together.
or die.
Join or die, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's the ultimatum. And I really think that businesses that aren't transforming digitally are bound to fail, right? They're setting themselves up for inevitable failure. Are you familiar with the book, The Innovator's Dilemma? Have you ever read that?
No.
So The Innovator's Dilemma, not to keep going off on a tangent, is a book, and I forget the author's name. I think I can't remember his name. But the concept is, why do some businesses fail and others succeed? And it talks about digital transformation to a certain extent, and explains why, established companies can be overtaken by upstarts, similar to what we're doing with the current project that we're working on, where it's a disruptive technology, right, that's coming out into a space to change the way we're doing things. We're seeing that now with AI, for example. Everyone and their mother seems to be talking about AI, and no one wants to miss the AI train or ship, so to speak. So With all that said, Charles, I'm gonna pass you the mic. What do you think? What does digital transformation mean to you?
Well, I mean, it's just based on what you were just saying. So I'm not exactly sure what you mean by digital transformation or going digital, but I was thinking about while you were talking there, I was thinking about Kodak as like this super example of like Kodak invented the digital camera. They
Right.
actually tasked a guy with it. They told him, in the 1970s, they said, "We want you to invent a camera that will digitally capture pictures and store them on this cassette tape." And he did. I've seen it. Like I think it's in the Smithsonian or the Kodak Museum or something. It's like this big digital camera. And they told him after he invented it, they say, "Okay, now destroy it." They said because we won't sell any more film if people are buying digital cameras. And Kodak was very much like the Gillette business model, right? We're not in the business of selling cameras. We're in the business of selling film or razor blades or whatever. They could have been the digital camera that of the future, and they chose not to. And as a result, they died, right? Like Kodak's barely hanging on anymore.
Fascinating.
Films film still exists for her hobbyists, but
Right.
in general, Kodak invented the digital camera and then chose not to adopt it. So I think that's your
That's a great example. And that's such a great
yeah,
story to reference. Yeah, and it really is shameful because like you said, they could have been at the epicenter of that digital camera evolution, right? It's wild to think that they must have thought that they were saving themselves, but really they were putting the nail in their own coffin, so to speak.
exactly. Yeah.
Any other examples come to mind? I know there's a few out there.
I mean, yeah, it's like the internet killed so many things. Just newspapers were a really big deal. I know that recently the paper here in town, San Diego Union, they sold for $350 million, and somebody said, "Well, why are why would you buy a newspaper for $350 million?" And they said, "Because they sit on $500 million worth of real estate."
Gotcha.
So they bought them just to kill them, just because their real estate was more valuable than the newspaper.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the newspapers were one of those things that didn't figure out how to do the internet fast enough.
Right. They didn't they
Like
didn't transform.
I think New York Times has finally figured it out, and Wall Street Journal finally figured it out. A couple of them have figured it out, but in
Took
general,
long enough,
newspapers died.
right?
Yeah, exactly. But what's funny is that I am not a fan of digital transformation. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah, so I've been doing this since I was 13 years old. Like I started writing inventory software and selling it, and so 40 years I've been doing this. And I don't like computers, and I think that I have a what I studied the Amish for a long time because I was interested in the way that Amish treat technology. People think that the Amish are like anti-technology, like oh, they don't adopt technology because they shun it or whatever. And that's not the case. It's when you actually do a study of it, what you'll learn is that the Amish consider technology and they consider its value to the community. Amish don't have telephones because they think that it's more valuable for the community if people go to each other's homes to speak with one another face to face. Um, the Amish, they allow themselves to have hay balers, but not hay loaders. And the difference is that if you have an automatic hay baler, it doesn't put a man out of work. But if you have an automatic hay loader, it puts a man out of work. So they consider their technology before adopting it. And I really think that that is a problem.
I agree.
Yeah. So we like adopt these technologies just because there's save money or do things faster. But when you're saving money, like you adopt AI,
Yeah.
I mean, Page Alive, which is the product we're developing now, is specifically to have a human being answer a support call, right? As opposed to going or a sales call or something like that, as opposed to going through a phone tree or speaking with a robot or whatever. And like, okay, well, robots are cheap. Like I can put a robot on the other side of this chat and it'll handle 90% of the phone calls. Okay, but then that puts two people out of work. Who's going to buy your product if those two people are out of work?
Totally. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So many dare I say, there is a lack of thought with when implementing a lot of technology. And the AI chatbot is a great example because there were repercussions and there are repercussions, right? Not only are you putting people out of work, but it's a lesser experience for its audience, right? So you're putting people out of work and you're deteriorating your customer service experience at the same time. So what really is it really is a net loss, in my opinion, for that business. And some organizations are starting to realize that as it relates to chatbots, where they realize that they can actually increase conversion, get more business by implementing a real life support person as opposed to an AI chatbot. And there's so many other examples just like that. And AI in particular excites me and terrifies me at the same time, right? Because it's like it in some ways it's exciting to see how vast and far technology has come and our abilities and what we can do with it, but at the same time it's like, what does that mean for the human element, right? And I think that Amish example that you reference is great because it ultimately, they calculate and they put the human first, right? They want to know what's the net win or net loss for their community, for their people. And I think that's something that we probably should do a little bit more of in the tech sector, especially. And that's something that we're trying to do with Page Alive, hence the name of this podcast, The Future is Human, because at the end of the day, what is it all for, right? What are we transforming digitally for, if not to better our lives, right? If it's just to save money, is it all worth it? Probably not.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if if people here that I work with specifically talk about how, in 10 years or 20 years, like all of the software that we write will be written by AI, and now a lot of like articles are written by AI. And I don't know that it will ever have the same kind of, I don't know, artistic flair that a human being will have. Like you can tell when something was generated by a computer. And will that get better? Yeah, but it's just copying. That just means that it's getting better at copying the work of people. And then what happens when all of that's being generated by computer and there's no more people to copy from, because we're all
Yeah.
out of work because the computer replaced us.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, so in your opinion, this process of digital transformation, do you think it sounds like you're against it for the most part. Is that fair to say?
I think it's a tool. I think
Well said.
like a wrench is a tool and a hammer is a tool, but it helps us do our work, but it doesn't put us out of work. And I think that's where the digital transformation is important. I love the work I do. Like I think this is the best work in the world, but I don't like the ideas of computers replacing humans because I like to work with them.
Yeah.
I don't want to think of computers replacing people. I don't think it's a good idea. A wrench never put a man out of work. It actually made more work for
Right.
people.
And it feels like, at least to me, that we're losing that, not to keep repeating myself, but it does feel like we're losing that human centricity, if that's even a word, that human focus, right? To your point, the reason a tool like a wrench was created was to make the person's life easier, right? To better their work or advance their work in some
Give
capacity.
them the ability to do more work.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like we lost that focus, right? And I wonder, in your opinion, how do we ensure that the human element is not lost during the transformation?
Yeah, not to toot my own horn, but I think tools like Page Alive will will help with that kind of thing if they're adopted. Like if people see us as a disruptor in this space and say that's a good idea.
Yeah.
But I fear there isn't an end to it. Like I think that, and this kind of doomsaying, I think, but it's an honest opinion. I feel like there's going to be a serious brain drain in the country in the next, or in the world, not just the country, in the world, in the next 20 or 30 years because people don't take the time to think anymore, right? Like every one of us has a supercomputer in our pockets,
Totally.
and so you go to the microwave and you're heating up your burrito or you're pumping gas or going for a walk or whatever. And those are the times when, you know, back in the olden days, when you couldn't do anything else but sit there and think about stuff. Like you're thinking about the product you're working on, or you're thinking about the poetry you're going to write when you get home tonight, or pondering things and working through problems and thinking about things. And now what people do when they're standing at the microwave waiting the 3 minutes for their burrito to cook, they're scrolling, right? I got to scroll through the AI generated ads to get to the content that I really like. Um, or that, or even if you're out for a walk or whatever, you still got your headphones plugged in and you're just listening to music or whatever. And you're not, I don't know. I don't think people are taking the time. It's leisure time. Okay, so
Yeah,
I'm gonna go way deep here. But I
go
used to
for it.
tell this story when I told stories at campfires and things like that. Like I worked for the Cub Scouts and for the city of Poway. And I used to tell this story about like I would do this while I was lighting a fire with a flint and steel, so it was like all magical and things. And I would tell this story about the snow white crow who went and stole fire from the sun and brought it back down to the earth so that people could be warm. And the gist of the story is that fire provided us with, like it was allowed us to cook our food so it was more nutritious. It gave us fire to keep us warm. It kept away the boogeyman in the dark. But fire gave us this one thing that allowed us to become the great thinkers that we are. And fire gave us leisure time. Because before then, all we were doing was hunting and gathering, And with fire, now you have the evenings where you can't go out and hunt and gather. You can sit and talk and draw cave paintings and
Right.
do all those things that you couldn't do before. And it's leisure time is what I think is what elevates human beings above animals, is it gives us this time to think and invent. And if we fill that space with, scrolling,
Yeah.
um, then we're not getting that development. And so I fear that that will become a problem in the future.
That's a great point, and that's a great argument. Now, do you think one could argue the flip side in the sense where maybe AI can be utilized as a tool and other technological advancements can be utilized as tools, allowing us more free time to do more creative thinking? Or do you fear that that's just not going to happen?
No, no, okay. So yeah, I think so. So this is funny because I will do this. When when we're at home and it's like I've got my iPad because have to have you can't just have the TV on. You got to have an additional screen with you.
Right? We're all guilty of
Uh,
it.
yeah. So I've got my iPad, and what I will do is like I'll be working on a book or something that I'm writing, and I will use Chat GPT. Like I'll talk to it. I actually had this huge conversation a while back. Like, first thing I said is, okay, we're going to write a mystery novel, and I need to bounce ideas off of you. So it's like, okay, I'm ready to go. And I was able to brainstorm with it without, because they didn't have any person available to brainstorm with. But it was able to have a conversation with me, and I was able to bounce ideas off. But in the end, the ideas were mine, and I didn't allow it to write anything for me. So I think that was a fantastic use of the tool. It allowed me to brainstorm ideas, and I use it a lot for that kind of thing. Like I will brainstorm ideas by having a conversation with it
Right.
in the same way that I would have a conversation with a person. Would I rather have a conversation with a person? Yeah. Was there one available for me at the time? No.
Yeah.
So
Good point.
I used it as a tool for brainstorming just to help me through my own thought process, but I did not allow it to do any of the work. Like in the end, the writing was mine, the story was mine.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Now, I want to say, and I feel like that's the general vision behind tools like that, right? To be used as tools, as accompanying elements, as opposed to overtaking our daily lives. But how do you think we as people, we as a culture and a society and businesses, how do we ensure that that's how, is there even a way to mitigate it, to manage it, to ensure that it's used as a tool and not, take over our lives? I don't know that there is. What do you think?
I don't think that there is, because there's cost savings in using it. And in the end, like cost savings wins. So
Yeah.
I mean I sound negative because I'm a Luddite, but
No, but it's a fair take. It's a fair
yeah.
take.
So it's more fear than anything else. Yeah.
And look, I think that's reasonable, because I think we all we fear the unknown, right? We don't know what it's going to bring and what kind of potential catastrophes can happen at the hands of this digital transformation. But what role do you think leaders, both in organizations, maybe even in government, should be taking when it comes to digital transformation? Maybe even AI specifically. Like, do you think there's a particular role that they should be taking?
Yeah, I think that careful consideration before adopting technologies is important.
Well
And
said.
like
That's
they just like the Amish do, you know?
I think I agree with you 100%. Now, I don't think that it's something that we can leave only up to government. My take is that that's something businesses, business leaders, and government officials alike should probably be both doing, right? And I don't think we do enough of that.
I actually have a good example of that. So, and it's something that it's a particular thorn in my side is that the iPhone has the lightning cable, right? And everybody's waiting for iPhone 15 to come out because it's going to have the same cable as everything else, right? In the United States, Apple is able to produce a phone with a lightning cable because there isn't any governmental organization saying that you have to make things easy on users. Like everybody hates the lightning cable. They've got to have this extra wire that and everything else that they get in their lives charges with a USB-C cable or a micro USB. And in Europe, and the only reason that Apple is changing is because in Europe, the government said, hey, you got to have the same cable as everything else. We're throwing tons and tons of cables into the garbage. People are hassled by this whole thing. It's like we're looking out for the consumer. This is something that the Department of Commerce in the US is supposed to do. But in
Yeah.
the US, we have more free capitalism. Like we wouldn't allow the government to tell us how to run our businesses, which honestly in the end is better, but it does hurt the consumer. And that's a perfect example of that. Is the government is saying you got to have the same cable as everybody else because it sucks otherwise.
Yeah, that is an
I mean,
absolute great example. And I agree with
look at
that. Yeah,
that.
I know it drives me crazy, and it's an example that hits close to home because I was just dealing with this a little earlier today, where I was looking for a lightning cable. I was like, I have a USB C, so I totally agree. It that rings close to home. Cool. Now, I guess where do you think we go from here as a society? What do you think if you had to rub a crystal ball and guess what happens in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you think happens when it comes to digital transformation?
I mean, like I was talking to one of our AI developers here the other day, and she was talking about the large language models and things like ChatGPT, et cetera. And she's actually working with them and trying to make them do all of the things they promised to do. She says they're not all that. Like, there's a lot of what they say is hype.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
I think that's the case. So I think it'll be longer before.
Yeah. Are you familiar with oh God, is the physicist Miko? I can't remember his name. But there was this physicist, this quantum physicist that I was listening to, and that's exactly what he was saying. There's a lot of fear with, and I think it's reasonable fear with when it comes to AI. But he was basically saying all they're doing is regurgitating human creation, right? They've scanned the internet, they've seen something that John Smith wrote, and they may be altering the verbiage a little bit, but the concept is that they're basically just borrowing from what humans have made. Now, one of the things that this particular physicist did allude to is once quantum computing comes into the mix, that will likely become a game changer in some capacity, and I can't tell you why. But have you looked into quantum computing at all?
Yeah, that's funny because it's so hard to understand.
Yeah,
It-
tell me
it-
about
there's
it.
there is no simple explanation of it. Like I've watched YouTube videos, I've read articles. I mean, it's not there yet. Like IBM has built a quantum computer, but it's still not there yet. Like it's not ready for prime time. But it's just so freaking complicated. Nobody has been able to explain it to me. And I mean, I've built computers from transistors, so I understand how they work. And so if I don't understand the explanation,
Yeah,
um,
right. There's a very limited few out there that probably do. And if you don't understand it, I definitely don't. Funny enough, I'm probably 10 or 15 minutes away from one of IBM's larger facilities in the Hudson Valley here in New York. So I might need to take a ride over there and see what they got going on. But from my understanding is, it needs to be like suspended in like a climate, like a sub-zero temperature. There's a lot of elements, and I agree. I think we're probably years away from us actually seeing it roll down into probably decades away from us seeing that roll down in the mainstream. But somehow, some way, um, they think that that'll implement that combined with AI will actually be a game changer.
So I think quantum computing has to happen. Like, there's a problem with transistors that a lot of people don't know about right now. They put so many transistors on a microchip, right? So it takes 21 transistors to add two 2-bit numbers together, and that doesn't scale. Like, if you add a 64-bit number together, it's not like you get to use fewer transistors. It's 21 times 64. It doesn't scale, so you need more and more transistors to do more things. And something like there's 9 billion transistors, and I could be totally wrong. I'm just trying to remember this factoid. 9 billion transistors on the M1 chip, something like that. They can't make transistors any smaller. Like, what has happened is they've gotten so small that the electrons are jumping the silicon gap.
Oh wow!
So something has to happen. Like, quantum
Right.
computers has to happen in order for computers to progress even further, or something else some other game changer has to come. Like, supposedly there was some breakthrough recently with room temperature superconductors that nobody has been able to repeat that experiment, but that could be a game changer.
Yeah.
Um, but definitely there has to be some change in the physics of computing in order for it to go on.
A lingering question that I have: how does one stay truly up to date the with technology? Right? Like, where do you get your news from?
I don't know that it's possible anymore.
That's
Like,
scary.
I work. I mean, I don't know. I'm in my 50s, and I work with people in their 20s, and they know computer writing computer software is so much more complicated than it used to be. Like, if you go to a website, people expect that website to know where you are.
You're right.
They expect it to know your thumbprint and all this other jazz that it used to be. We'd write a website because we wanted to profess the love to a punk band or something like that. It's writing software is so much more complicated than it used to be, and computers are so much more complicated. I think to keep up, first of all, you have to wait for technology to settle down, right? Like, I invested in home automation way before I should have. And so it's harder to do, you know? I remember now this is how old I am. I remember when CD-ROM drives came out, and they were a huge pain to install and make work. They didn't work with Windows right away. You had to install all sorts of weird drivers, and you had to tell it to not do disk compression when it's using there was all these tricks. I have a scar right here where I installed Carolee's, like her first Christmas when it's using the was a CD-ROM drive, and I installed it, and I got this scar where I took 2 stitches Christmas morning. Um,
You got a hell of a
but
story, though.
yeah, when you're an early adopter of a technology, they're so much harder to use. If you wait a while, they become easy to use. Like, you remember how it used to be to hook up to a printer or a scanners
Yeah.
are still hard. But it used to be so hard to do these things, and then as they become mainstream, they're easier to work with. So I think that's one way to keep up, is kind of ignore it until it becomes mainstream.
That's good
Maybe
advice.
that's a bad idea.
No, I can resonate with that. I agree with that. I don't know if it's good or bad, but I agree with that for sure. What other advice would you give, whether it's to consumers or probably even more importantly, as far as our listenership goes, to companies and businesses when it comes to technology? Would you echo that advice that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I think the same thing I said earlier is just like, be not careful, but be not conscientious. God, I wish could. I'm I didn't take my ginkgo today, so I'm struggling to find a word. But I'm just saying, be
Cautious.
careful. Be specific about the technology you choose. Be careful about the technology you choose. Like, don't employ some technology because you think it's going to save you money. Whether it does or it might not, but also you could be putting your customers out of work. That's my advice in the long term. Is people need to be more selective in choosing their technologies.
I think
Technology's
that's good.
great. I mean,
Yeah.
they've made a good living at it,
Yeah,
but
right. Yeah, no, I
but
think overall it definitely is for the greater good, or tries to serve the greater good. But I think that's good, wise advice and wisdom in the sense where we need to be mindful and I think careful is good as well, as far as how we go about adopting it, and then probably even more importantly implementing it.
yeah, exactly.
Well, Charles, we've been at this for over 30 minutes. I want to be mindful of your time. So thank you so much for coming onto the show. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
I could go on all day. So just that, like, be selective in the technology you choose to use. Try to be more human about things, and maybe leave your phone behind when you're going jogging.
That is great advice. I think that is excellent advice. Definitely be more human conscious. And I agree. We can be here all day talking with each other. I'm definitely going to have you back for another episode if you're up for it in the future. Always a pleasure speaking with you. And thanks again for coming on.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
All right, Charles. Talk to you soon, man. Take care.
Bye bye.